To some, he was a revolutionary icon. To others, a ruthless dictator. For nearly 50 years, he was the defiant face of Cuba. Today, we're going to break down the life and legacy of one of the 20th century's most polarizing figures, Fidel Castro.
So, how can one guy end up with such completely opposite legacies? To really get a handle on the revolutionary and the tyrant, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, to the ideas that first set him on this incredible path. Long before he was a guerrilla fighter in the mountains or a leader on the world stage, Fidel Castro was a law student in Havana, and that's really where the seeds of his revolution were first planted.
At the University of Havana, he just dove headfirst into leftist and anti-imperialist politics. He got absolutely furious with the corruption of the US-backed government, which was led by a man named Fulgencio Batista. And that anger? It finally boiled over in 1953, when he led this daring but ultimately disastrous attack on the Moncada military barracks.
He ended up in prison for the attack, but Castro, being Castro, turned his own trial into a political stage. Get this, he acted as his own lawyer and delivered this defiant, hours-long speech that would basically become the manifesto for his entire revolution. And he wrapped it all up with that legendary line, "History will absolve me."
So, did prison and exile stop him? Not a chance. If anything, it just gave him time to plan a better revolution. From Mexico, Castro regrouped, and he got ready for round two.
So in Mexico, he links up with his key allies, his brother Raul and his charismatic Argentine doctor you've probably heard of, Che Guevara. Their return to Cuba was almost a joke, on a leaky, overcrowded yacht of all things, but what came next was anything but. It was a masterful 2-year guerrilla campaign. From the Sierra Maestra Mountains, their small rebel force slowly won the trust of the rural population, and their support just swelled, until on New Year's Day 1959, the Batista government completely collapsed. Now, taking power was one thing. Holding on to it? That was a whole other ballgame. Castro moved with lightning speed to remake Cuba in his own image, and pretty much every move he made put him on a collision course he just couldn't avoid with the superpower just 90 miles to the north. Now, Castro had promised elections, right? Well, once he was in charge, he put those on hold, indefinitely. He argued that radical social and economic change had to come first. His new slogan became, "Revolution first, elections later." And we're not just talking about changing the government. He flipped the whole system on its head. Cuba became the first communist state in the Western Hemisphere. He seized American-owned businesses, silenced anyone who dared to speak out against him, and started cozying up to a powerful new friend, the Soviet Union.
So by 1961, with the U.S. invasion looking more and more likely, Castro just came out and said it. His revolution was socialist. And listen to how he framed it. This wasn't just some political shift. It was a direct challenge, a socialist state built, as he put it, under their noses. And that right there kicked off a chain of events that literally changed the world. First up, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, a complete disaster backed by the CIA that only made Castro's grip on power even stronger. And then, in 1962, came the Cuban Missile Crisis, the absolutely terrifying 13-day standoff that became the single most dangerous moment of the entire Cold War, all because Castro let the Soviets put nuclear weapons on the island. Now for Castro, this revolution wasn't just for Cuba. No, he saw it as a blueprint for the entire world. And he was more than ready to export it. So you see him turning Cuba into this, unlikely global power, sending troops to support Marxist allies in places like Angola and Ethiopia. But here's the thing. While Castro was playing this revolutionary role on the world stage, the combo of a crippling U.S. embargo and his own bad economic planning meant that back home, ordinary Cubans were facing serious food shortages and rationing. Then, in 1991, the unthinkable happened. Castro's main lifeline, his biggest supporter, the Soviet Union, just collapsed. And without all that Soviet money, Cuba was plunged into the worst economic crisis of its modern history. This time was officially known as the Special Period. And let me tell you, it was a time of unbelievable hardship, defined by severe shortages of just about everything you can imagine. It really tested the limits of Castro's regime and the strength of the Cuban people. I mean, the scale of this collapse was just staggering. Get this. In less than 2 years, the entire Cuban economy shrank by over 40%. It was a total freefall, and Castro's government had to turn to some desperate measures, like even legalizing the US dollar, just to keep the country from going completely under. So, after almost half a century in power, it was actually his failing health that finally forced Castro to take a step back, leaving behind a nation that had been profoundly and irreversibly shaped by his rule.
You could really see his grip on power, which was once so absolute, start to loosen. It all started in 2006 when an illness made him temporarily hand things over to his brother Raul. That became official in 2008, and by 2011, he had stepped down from the Communist Party too. He kind of lingered on as this revolutionary patriarch, a living symbol of the past, until he died in 2016 at the age of 90.
And so here we are, right back where we started, with this incredibly deep and passionate divide over the guy's legacy. On one hand, supporters will always point to the very real progress in literacy and healthcare, and how he stood up for Cuban independence. But on the other hand, critics will never let you forget the political prisoners, the silenced press, and an economy that was driven into the ground.
So, hero or villain, a freedom fighter who stood up to an empire or a tyrant who imprisoned his own people? His impact is absolutely undeniable, but his legacy? Well, that's anything but settled. Decades ago, a young Fidel Castro stood in a courtroom and declared, "History will absolve me." The question that still hangs in the air is, has it?